Jonathan, you may want to get more in the habit of muting your microphone, especially when you're feeding your dog. Jonathan, you may want to get more in the habit of muting your microphone, especially.
The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what is it, Sunday afternoon. At least it's afternoon here in Puerto Rico. I know for some of you, it's only noontime. So welcome. Jennifer, is it getting cold?
Tomorrow we might have snow in a couple days.
Yeah, snow. I'm so glad I don't live in Michigan. All right. All right, welcome everybody. Today we've got our contributors. Let's see, we've got one more joined. Is that right? Galaxy. I have no idea who Galaxy is. Galaxy Note 10. Let's get a look at everybody. All right, you'll have to identify yourself or put on the video so we can see you to figure out who you are. Okay, and we've got Naveen. All right, it's Daniel. Hi, Dan. That's better. Okay. All right, so we're going to just jump in with questions. We'll start with Jim. You were on first. Go for it.
Hey, guys. Well, I'm also in the Midwest here in Wisconsin, and looking forward to moving to Miami in a few months. It's getting exciting. Maybe to get out of the progressive hellhole of Madison and to a slightly less progressive hellhole of Miami. No, seriously, I'm looking forward. It's exciting. So I have a very simple question that probably requires a complex answer. What's your personal prediction, expectation about this winter, the next few months when it comes to coronavirus, when it comes to both your best guess of how hard it's going to hit us and what the political ramifications are going to be in the short term?
Well, I mean, in terms of cases, it's already hitting hard. So we're already seeing that. I don't see any reason why it gets better. Winter months are good for viruses. It's why we get the flu in the winter. It just makes sense that this is going to keep going through the winter. I think that once you start vaccinating, things will get significantly better. And I will also note the death rates are not spiking. I mean, they're up, but they're not spiking. So death rates are quite significantly lower than what they were in March and April. And it does seem like, doctors know how to treat this better. Medication is better, just the whole way of handling it once you get into hospital. So the hospitals are full right now, but I'm not seeing the spike in deaths that you would expect if you extrapolate from the spring. But it would be a mistake to extrapolate from the spring because we know a lot more about the virus now. LA is shutting down. I hear this. They're talking about stay-at-home orders in LA. I mean, no, I don't. Like Pasadena, which is part of LA County, is like, no, we're not gonna pay any attention to that. And the Pasadena City Council said, no, we're still doing dining and everything. So there's definitely a backlash, but some places are going to shut down, some places are going to close down, other places will be open. The general trend is not good. The general trend is because the lessons learned are not good. The lessons are, mistakenly. People are learning from it. Oh, we need more state intervention. We need more state control. Capitalism can deal with these things. Freedom can't deal with these things. Individuals are irresponsible. They can't deal with these things. So we need more, authoritarian control of our lives, not less. So that's my fear is that is going. I do think once we get the vaccines out and people start getting vaccinated, there'll be a significant decline because, if you vaccinate susceptible people, then fewer people go to the hospitals, fewer people end up in ICUs, and that'll relieve the pressure on the hospitals. And then you start vaccinating other people, and then you get just the numbers, right? So if you vaccinate even 10% of the population, well, that's 10% that are not going to get it. So just the numbers start shrinking as you vaccinate more people. So I think the turnaround could be fairly quick if they can vaccinate quickly. And you have to admire kind of the logistic challenge of doing all these vaccinations, and people like Pfizer rising to the challenge. So what you're seeing is Pfizer's basically leasing all of United's airplanes for cargo shipments of dry ice. Their thing has to be kept at minus 80 degrees Celsius. So it's very difficult to transport. UPS has invested heavily in dry ice, so there's going to be this big logistical push to get these out to pharmacies. They're going to have to vaccinate quickly because it can only be away from freezing cold like that for a few days, or like 3 days, I think. Still has to be frozen, but not at those levels. So they're going to have to vaccinate quickly. It'll be interesting to see where the vaccination happens, who does them. But hopefully they can use the infrastructure built for flu vaccines to get this done. Doctors' offices, CVS's, Walgreens, and places like that. So once the vaccine's out, I'm fairly optimistic. That is a big cat. Is that not a big cat? Or is that just the distortion of the camera? For a second there, it looked like a mountain lion was walking into Jennifer's room. All right, that's my take. I don't know. I'm constantly overly optimistic about these things. I never thought we'd get this third wave, because I thought suddenly they'd get their act together by now. There was an interesting article today in the Boston Globe, actually, about universities in Massachusetts. So University of Massachusetts are open. And guess what universities in Massachusetts are doing? They've hooked up with some local labs. And what they're doing is, brace yourselves. They're testing, tracing, isolating. Basically, students are getting tested every week. They get results within 24 hours. They isolate the people who are infected. They trace who they've been with and try to isolate or test them. But they're testing huge quantities. So while Massachusetts cases are spiking, the cases within the universities are pretty low. Everything's fine. And whereas the other universities are seeing cases spike because people are partying and there's no testing and everything. Again, Massachusetts, in the Boston area, things are very stable. So I would have thought months ago that state governments would have figured out and built up the infrastructure to test, trace, isolate. But never underestimate the incompetence and stupidity of government. All right, Jonathan. Now that's a big dog. You're muted.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for the volume and of material you've been putting out lately. It's been just great intellectual ammunition at an important time. And I'm looking forward to the New Year's show as well. And thank you to all the donors who are matching and, upping your, they're raising the bar for all of us who are donors of yours, but we're happy to continue to have that raised. So I wanted to ask you about something out of the Middle East in the last couple of days that I read about. You and I are both fans of Fauda, and it was almost like something out of Fauda happened. As I understand it, in Iran, one of Iran's top nuclear scientists was assassinated in this very coordinated, amazing hit job that involved a number of people, and that supposedly was carried out by Israel. I don't think it's been confirmed. I think John Brennan, some Americans condemn this as an act of political violence. So I wanted to know what your take is on that, is that the type of thing that America, for example, should be involved in, is, efficient assassinations of, people high level in Iran, Saudi Arabia, North Korea. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, this is the second assassination in Tehran, in the Tehran area. that we found out about. I think the first assassination happened in the summer. The first assassination was actually assassinating Al Qaeda's number 2, who's been living in Iran for a long time, and was assassinated there. And the assumption is, and I think there's credible evidence of this, that the Israelis did it at the request of the U.S. We don't know exactly, but clearly the Israelis did it. So they assassinated also in a very coordinated attack in a suburb of Tehran, the number 2 Al Qaeda guy in the world. And then now they've assassinated the number 1 nuclear scientist in Iran, but not just any nuclear scientist, the guy who worked on converting, in building nuclear weapons. So he was the guy who was responsible for the entire nuclear program in Iran. I think this has been going on for a long time. Israel, every few years you hear about scientists or assassinated in Iran. It's not always as big headlines as this one was, but I think the Israelis have a program to take out anybody involved in this program, take out the brains of the operation, so they can't build the nuclear bomb. They did this. Some of you might remember. Most of you are probably too young to, but Israel took out the Iraqi nuclear power plant in 1980 or 81, maybe 81. And before they took out the actual nuclear power plant, they for years had been killing Iraqi scientists who were working on the plant. So they basically, will not tolerate the building of nuclear weapons by an enemy nation, and they're taking them out. Now, look, I believe all this is weak and not enough, and only delays. It doesn't change the projection. A lot of the scientists that work in places like Iran and others on nuclear power program might be from North Korea, they might be from Pakistan, who has nuclear weapons. They might be Russians who used to be under the Soviet Union. It's hard to assassinate every nuclear scientist out there and identify them and do it. The proper thing Israel and the United States should do is bomb any facility that is suspected of nuclear activity into oblivion. That is, make sure that not only is it bombed and destroyed and cannot ever be used, but send a clear message. Every time you build something, we will knock it out. We will destroy it. So I still think it's weak to go out there and assassinate. To say, North Korea, you assassinate this general, another general comes about. Israel's been assassinating leaders, military leaders of the Hamas for decades. All right, every time a military leader is kicked out, a new military leader comes in. Trump assassinated Soleimani, the head of the National Guard in Iran. Was it about a year ago? They've replaced him. Somebody else is there to do the work. You either take them out. I mean, what you need to do is take them out. These little pinpricks, I don't think in the long run are effective, even though they buy you time.
Well, quick follow-up. Is America's policy against political assassination altruistic? Is that self-sacrifice?
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Now, it came out of a period where the CIA was probably assassinating people without strategy, without a real clear view of why they were doing it and what was going to replace these people. So I'm not saying that the prohibition at the time, but yes, I mean, every tool should be available to the military and to the president and to those in foreign policy to deal with enemies. I mean, if you could assassinate Stalin, wouldn't you? If you could assassinate Hitler, wouldn't you? So absolutely, the United States should permit assassinations. We do it with the drones, right? We're taking out Al Qaeda people all the time and ISIS people all the time with drones. It should be broader. Israel, unfortunately, suffers from the same problem. They assassinate Hamas military leaders, but they won't assassinate Hamas political leaders. but it's the political leaders that probably do more damage. So if somebody's dedicated to your destruction, you should destroy them first. Is the basic.
Thank you.
All right, Darius.
Thanks, Jaron. So, yeah, I want to thank you also for really kind of leaning into this whole Great Reset thing, and the episodes on that have been really helpful. I really enjoyed the interview with Alex yesterday. I think in that episode yesterday, you kind of talked about or touched on the idea of the government's role in financing the development of the COVID vaccine. But I'm still not totally sure where you stand on that. What's your opinion on the government's role in financing it? What would you prefer?
I mean, in a laissez-faire free market, they wouldn't. They wouldn't and shouldn't. But in the world in which we live in today, to some extent, I mean, they do a lot of the basic research. So, for example, the Moderna vaccine was developed jointly by Moderna and the National Institute for Health, right? And the National Institute for Health exists. It is a institution that exists, that does a lot of basic research, that is obviously funded by the government. And you can't ignore the fact that it exists. Now, I think its existence actually crowds out capital from flowing into private research. So in a free market, it wouldn't exist, or it would be private. But in the world in which we live today, everything's mixed. Nothing is pure. Now, the Pfizer vaccine, as far as I know, had no government funding in the research or development. And most of the research and development happened in Germany with this company that Pfizer teamed up with. The only part where the government was involved is in the government bought in advance, paid in advance for, I don't know, so many hundred millions. Should the government be buying vaccines? No, it's not the government's job to vaccinate us. So the government should have very little role in a pandemic. The only role in a pandemic for the government in a free market society is to test, trace, and isolate. And it's not even clear that they need to test. The only thing that the government is uniquely qualified at doing is isolating. And that is making sure that if you have the vaccine, you don't go and infect other people. Sorry, if you have the virus, you don't go and infect other people. So the only real use of government is for isolation. Everything else in a free market could be handled privately. Insurance companies would be buying vaccines, and insuring, and who would get the vaccine would be determined by insurance companies, not by government, not by government policy. You would either pay through your insurance or you pay cash, depending on what kind of program you had with your insurance company. But all of that would be the responsibility of the insurance companies, clinics, doctor clinics, hospitals, place like that. The government would have no role in any of that.
And you just know that for the next probably year, we're going to have endless political battles over what city, what state, what countries these vaccines should go to.
Absolutely, and it's already started. You saw Trump saying, "We're not sending anything to New York." Right? I mean, it's ridiculous. But it should be market driven, and it won't be. And when we get everybody vaccinated, people will turn around and say, see what government can do. See how wonderful these government, what do you call it, public-private partnerships can achieve. It's just like after the financial crisis when the government bailed out all the banks, which is the equivalent here. And then, economists said, see, the government does have a function. It can save the banking system. It can save the economy. We could have had a depression, and we didn't because the government stepped in and did this wonderful stuff. That makes sense? Darius, you look like you have a puzzled look on your face.
I'm processing, but thank you.
Sure. All right, Jennifer.
I was watching Star Trek, and Mr. Spock said you can't ever guarantee the actions of another person. So I thought, well, yeah, I guess that's true because people have free will, so you don't know what someone's going to do.
Yep.
But if you've known the person a long time and they've been, let's say, consistently moral or rational, isn't that evidence that they probably will again?
Oh, absolutely. So I don't think you can predict what somebody will do with certainty, with certainty, but you certainly can, with a very high confidence level, predict what they will do. And we know people we know well. We pretty much know how they'll react to certain situations. We don't always get it right, but for the most part, we get it right. So with a very high degree of likelihood, with confidence, you can predict what somebody will do. You just can't have certainty because there is free will. People can change. Weird things can happen.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. Ori.
Hey, Ron.
Hey.
So I discovered you and Objectivism probably like 3 years ago when you were on Dave Rubin's show.
Okay. Good.
And after that, I never really watched his show again. But just recently, in recent times, I went and checked out his channel just out of curiosity. And what the hell happened to that guy? I mean, I never thought he was like particularly smart, but to go from being one of the more rational voices out there to today where he's promoting the idea that Trump had the election stolen from him. I mean, that's crazy. What happened?
It's hard to tell, but I don't know, and I haven't talked to him, so I don't have firsthand information. But look, he told me, and this is true, that he was very influenced by Jordan Peterson. He traveled around the world with Jordan. He attended all of Jordan's talks because he was the opening act for Jordan Peterson, and he was very impacted by Jordan, by religion, by that whole, what happened around that. I think as a consequence, it opened him up. And then he met a lot of pro-Trump people that he liked, I think. And he slowly drifted towards, towards being more and more favorable towards Trump. I guess he met Trump at some point and Trump charmed him. Trump is very charming, I think, in person. Sometime I hope that John Ellison actually tells his story about, he had 2 interviews with Trump where Trump was interviewing him for a position in government. And John walked away from those basically saying, I will never, ever, ever under any circumstances work for this guy. So it would be great if he actually told the story. It's not my story to tell, but in terms of what Trump said to him, that would make him say that. But, but he charmed Dave. I think a lot of the people around Dave, some of the people he interviewed, were pro-Trump, and and it got him a lot of, my channel would be like 5 times bigger if I were pro-Trump, and there's a lot of money tied to that. So I'm not saying that's what motivated him, but it's easy to get seduced, particularly when you don't have grounding, when you're not grounded, right? When you don't have principles. And I think whatever principles he had, or the principles he had, were shaken by Jordan, by Jordan Peterson.
Would you go on his show again if he offered?
Yeah, I would go on his show. I don't view him as a bad person. And it's not like, if I go on his show, I'm sanctioning his Trump position because everybody knows what my position on Trump is. So I don't see a lot of downside to going in his show. And, I hope he has me on the show to talk about Trump. Right. I
think he's a smart guy and he means well, but I do believe that he's more anti-left, and that's what's motivating him, is a desire to stop the left.
And it's the same thing that has driven objectivists, so many objectivists, to be pro-Trump. It's the anti-left, and I do think there's a certain element of Trump just standing up against everybody, just a willingness of Trump to just stand up and call it, right? And call the left on this stuff. I mean, that appeals to people. And I think that is the attraction. They're so fed up with what is going on. Scott says Jordan Peterson corrupted Dave Rubin. Yeah, I think he did. There's no, The ideas of Jordan Peterson are corrupting at the end, because at the heart of it is faith. At the heart of it is a Christian morality and a Christian epistemology. And you can't escape the consequences of that. So as good of a person as you might be, I think long-term, and I said this years ago, Jordan Peterson in the long run, can be poison for a lot of people. I know a lot of atheists. I've heard from a lot of atheists who have given up on atheism because of Jordan Peterson. And Sam Harris didn't do us a lot of favors by having such a weak response to Jordan, by being in those debates that they did or whatever, not really being able to. It seemed like Jordan Peterson had the upper hand relative to Sam Harris in terms of some of these issues. Okay, Naveen.
Hey, Ron. Can you hear me?
Yep, perfectly.
Okay, great. My first show. Great to be here.
Welcome. Great to have you here.
Of course, followed you for years, but glad I'm finally here. It's great. I wanted to ask you, maybe this question will you could probably take a whole show on this, but I wanted to ask you about how you manage your time and how you actually keep track of all the things you have to do. Right? Do you have on a broader level, do you have like a to-do list, or do you just have like one big thing you need to manage? Or and also specifically, like what kind of news channels do you follow, and so that you can follow but not get too distracted and get into this whole overconsumption mode and focus on production?
So I don't use to-do lists. I've tried to use to-do lists. I've tried all kinds of softwares and all kinds of things. Things is one of the software that I used, and I liked it, but I can never get myself to be systematic about it. So don't use my methodology as a good standard, because I don't think it's appropriate for everybody. I manage to hold a lot of stuff in my head in terms of what I need to do. I do take down notes. I actually use pen and paper. I have to-do lists in that sense, but I'm not systematic about it. Indeed, my whole approach to these things is not very systematic. I have a calendar. That's the one thing I cannot live without, is my calendar. Everything, all my meetings on the calendar, and that kind of frames my day. My meetings frame my day, and then what I need to do is to a large extent related to those meetings. The challenges are that I have, 3 different careers or something like that, 3 completely different things I'm trying to do. So holding it all together is difficult. I do have a full-time assistant. She helps me quite a bit, keep track of everything. She's tried to get me to use to-do lists, digital to-do lists, but I just am not organized enough. I'm just not I'm not good with habits. I'm not good with repetition. I'm not good with, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you do the same
rigor, like regimen.
Regimen. I mean, I like every day to be different, and I like to, I like to travel. I like to go to different places. I like to every day to do different things. I get bored very easily. Just generally in life, I get bored very easily and very quickly. So I need to be on the move, either intellectually or physically, in order to keep engaged and keep interested. So COVID was tough, because for months, I didn't go anywhere, and that was very strange for me, and it still is strange for me, right? I've been on planes. I'm going to be on a plane on Thursday, but relatively speaking, I barely traveled the last year, and that's very strange. So I just try to use the calendar to shape what I need to get done, who I'm meeting, what the orientation is. I have lists. I write stuff down in a very disorganized way. And somehow I manage. I'm not very good at answering emails very quickly, so I apologize to everybody listening who hasn't got an email response from me lately. I'm known for not responding. Sometimes I respond quickly, sometimes because I flag all the emails I know I'm supposed to respond, but sometimes it takes me 2 weeks to look at all the flagged emails because I get distracted with other things. So again, I don't recommend any of that to anybody. If you can figure out how to use a to-do list and to be regimented about it and to do it regularly and to follow it, I think it would be a big improvement. I just have not found I started doing it too late in life to be able to change, I guess.
Having read Letters of Ayn Rand and just many of her works, I can't say I can discern a process for her either. What do you think?
Well, I don't want to compare myself to her. And
No,
I
no,
don't,
not comparing, but I'm just curious at what you know about her process.
well, she was much more focused than I am. So I don't want the comparison, but she was completely focused, right? She when she was writing Atlas Shrugged, she was writing Atlas Shrugged. I mean, it was this massive length. I'm not like me. I'm not like that. I do a lot of different things, and I find it very difficult. I mean, partially the books got written because I had Dawn, right? Because writing books requires you to have that focus on lengthy periods of time and so on. In terms of news, I try not to watch TV news at all. So I don't use the TV for news, except like election night, where you're getting immediate, stuff and just the fun. It's like a sports event, right? That's what elections are, like sports, where you're not really backing either team, right? You're just curious about how it all turned out. Although it's much more fun if you're backing a team, like in sports. So I don't watch TV news because I don't find it useful at all. I read. So Google News is open on my computer screen all day long, basically. I probably go to it, 10 times a day, just scan. And, Apple News, it opens up. Maybe I look at Apple News twice a day. It's also, the aggregators. And I scan them. In the days where I traveled a lot, I would read the Wall Street Journal on the flight. So almost every day I would be traveling. I would read the Wall Street Journal. I like the Wall Street Journal, but it's also very biased. So you can't just use that. I like to read things like The Atlantic, even though, again, I know it's biased because they have more in-depth pieces, or even The New Yorker sometimes, or any of these longer pieces are interesting. Sometimes all I have to read is a paragraph or two to get the gist of something. But a lot of it is just scanning to see what catches my eye and what catches my interest. So it's really, in a sense, easy for me to do. But if I read a story and it's important, like I read the stuff about the election fraud, right? So I read the stuff, and if I think, oh, that's kind of interesting, I wonder what's about this, then I'll search deeper, and then I'll say, okay, what's going on with Dominion systems, right? The computer system that's used in some counties in 23 states. And then you start reading about it. So then I'll find the fact checks, and then I'll find long articles about Dominion, and I'll look into the history of it. And if there are issues about the ownership, then you can pull up, you can pull up a 13G, and you can find if it's a publicly traded company, which I can't remember if Dominion is, but you can find ownership stuff on Bloomberg or on some way, different sites. So it depends on, if I want to go deep into a story, then I go deep into a story. And there are a lot of resources that you can find if you go then. Now, there's one other thing I do. There are now these, this is new. They call them stacks. I don't know if you're familiar with stacks.
No.
They're like blogs. They're like what used to be blogs, but they're like email distribution lists. And there are a number of these groups of writers that have teamed up together, and they basically put out an email a day with their writings, and you can click and you can go to a website and read it on the web, but basically you're getting it in email form. And they usually team up around some ideologically coherent, they're all about the same ideology. So there are a number of these Substacks, they're called those. I think they're called stacks. Anyway, there are a few that I subscribe to. I subscribe to the Dispatch, which is Jonah Goldberg and French and a number of others. And they also have, what's interesting about them is they have a fact-checking function. They also do fact-checking. So they've hired people to do fact. And I find the fact-checking to be, reasonably thorough. They point you in the directions that if you want to go deeper, you can. They're from the right, but they're from the anti-Trump right. So these are all Republican never Trumpers. And I find them, they're all good writers. and interesting. So there's always something worthwhile in what they've written for me, even though, again, I often don't agree with them. And there's some others. There's like one, and I can't remember the name of it now. Maybe if I bring up my email, I'll find it. But there's one that's more written from a left of center perspective. So leftists who are opposed to cancel culture, who are opposed to the attacks on free speech, who are, pro-reason, some more Steven Pinker-like leftists. And they have a stack as well. So Dispatch, let's see what else I can find here. Yeah, I don't know. And then I'm subscribed to Medium. Medium's very mixed. A lot of it's about exercise and food. And you get 5 articles with 5 different opinions about exactly the same issue, all claim to be super scientific. So I don't know how valuable that is. I'm trying to find, there's one other one that I find interesting. I mean, all of them, again, you just have to read broadly because none of them are good enough in a sense that they give you what you need to get. They all kind of point you in the right direction. Problem is I have too many email accounts and I can't remember what's in which account. Anyway, that's a beginning, but look at these stacks. It's becoming very, very popular now.
Sure.
And something a lot of people are using to send out information. If I find
so you broadly manage your day with calendar, but you intersperse it with browsing the stacks and these aggregate news.
So between meetings, I'm online scanning news and reading articles and doing stuff like that. So yes, in that sense. I mean, I have some work I need to do that is not related to that, other than meetings. I mean, a lot of my work is meetings, so I do that work as well. But a lot of it is this kind of reading and figuring stuff out.
Do you put the fun stuff you want to do also on your calendar, like going to a concert, whatnot?
Yeah, if I'm going to concerts on the calendar, restaurants on the calendar, but like beach is not on the calendar.
Okay.
I'll just go. Although sometimes I guess it is. If it's in the middle of a work day, I'll put it on the calendar to make sure that we don't schedule any meetings or anything else around it.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. All right, Daniel.
So right now, COVID is interesting to talk about comparison to the election, which continues to roar on. And now these 700,000 too many votes in Pennsylvania, mail-in votes. When is that?
Yes, there are more people voted than actually live, or I don't know, something like that. But none of it, once you dig a little deeper into it, none of it is true. It's just, they make this stuff up constantly. Oh, the other one is called Persuasion. The other stack is called Persuasion, and it's organized by a guy named Yasha Monk, M-O-U-N-K, and he is one of these leftists who signed the anti-canceling, full-page ad in one of the newspapers a few months ago, and he's reasonable and he's interesting to read, and he's got a bunch of other people who write for him as well. So it's I find it interesting. All right. Sorry. Dan.
So when does this all die down to the point where we can, talk about stories other than the election? Is it going to be this way for 4 years, or are they going to calm down?
Well, there's no question it'll be like this for 4 years. I mean, it won't be quite like this because Trump won't be in the White House, so he won't be able to dominate like he is right now, and there won't be this uncertainty about, is there a coup and all of that? How's he going to leave? Is he going to be escorted out? I think that ends inauguration, right? I mean, he's going to leave and somebody else is going to go in. So that's, that's when that'll end. But look, the only reason Trump is doing this, I mean, the two reasons Trump is doing this. One is because he suffers from a privacy of consciousness, and he, his whole methodology of thinking in quotes, requires him to, and his self-esteem requires him to believe that it was cheated. And if you remember, he believed he won the popular vote against Hillary. I mean, for years, he's been saying he won the popular vote for Hillary. Never any evidence, never any clues, even nothing. But he keeps saying, I won the popular vote against Hillary, when he clearly didn't. So he needs, one is he that's how his mind works. Second is, this is his rallying call for 2024, whether he runs or whether he runs a candidate who represents him. He is gonna, for the next 4 years, he's gonna be on the sidelines, railing against Democrats, railing against Republicans, and creating this massive political force that is gonna dominate American politics. You're gonna have to deal with it. Republicans will have to deal with it. Democrats will have to deal with it. He's not going away, and the energy he created and the people who love him, love him, are not going away. It's
maybe Twitter will start subsidizing him to keep Twitter alive.
Yeah, there you go. Because Twitter was dying before Trump got elected, so that's true. But he's not. Whether he starts a news channel, whether he takes over an existing news channel, whether he just trolls Fox, whatever he does, he's going to be the dominant force in American politics. I mean,
none of that says that he's going to become a driving force for voter reform, so their fraud is much more difficult or anything like that.
No, because I think he will try to argue that mail-in voting should be banned. Although, of course, he's voted by mail many times, right? So we all have. I mean, I have. But he will argue that mail-in voting should be banned. But no, he's not an issues guy, right? It's not like he's going to take this issue about reforming the electoral system, and no, he's going to argue that the election was stolen from him. He's going to argue against everything Biden does. He's going to attack Republicans for caving. It's going to be 4 years of nonstop Trump trolling everybody, and then the question is, are people going to buy into it? Are people going to stay loyal to him? Are people going to be? And there's a good chance they are. Or is there going to be some other charismatic person who can compete with him? And I don't see who that is, because certainly not Biden. Has no charisma. So who's going to be able to compete with Trump? And if we go into recession, and if things don't go well for Biden, who knows what could happen in terms of the next election? And there's a good chance we go into recession under Biden. Or China takes Taiwan, or who knows? I mean, a lot of things can go wrong in the next 4 years that would make a Trump presidency very likely, very, very, very possible.
Double-digit inflation.
Yeah, well, double-digit inflation. There's one that's likely, yeah. All right, let's see. Let's do some super chat, and then we'll go back. Why did Paul Krugman change the title of his article from "How Many People Did Ayn Rand Kill" to "When Libertarianism Goes Wrong"? Does that show we have a voice in the culture? Yeah, it wasn't Paul who changed it. It was the New York Times who changed it. So the New York Times changed it. New York Times came under pressure. A lot of people wrote in. A lot of people wrote to Paul Krugman, and he acknowledged it in a tweet that people are telling him that he's misrepresenting Ayn Rand and she was a more sophisticated thinker. And he said he doesn't know, but his point still stands. But then the New York Times, I think, forced his hand. So, yeah, I do think we have a voice in the culture. I think we have a much bigger voice in the culture than people think. It's not influential yet. It's not a voice that people are listening to, except at the margin yet. But it's out there. I mean, I think I told you that I was told, for example, that there were people in the Trump White House listening to Yaron Brook's show, in spite of my attacks on Donald Trump. So I don't know who it was. I don't know how senior they were or anything. But yeah, with there, they certainly, a lot of people in this administration know Ayn Rand, know objectivism, even know who I am. So I think we have a bigger presence and a bigger influence in the culture than we think. Just like Ayn Rand herself had a massive influence in the culture, even though she didn't win elections, she didn't change. You couldn't see it, but in subtle ways, the way people in those days, in the 70s, I'd say, switched to be more pro-capitalism was, I think, because of Ayn Rand. The attitude that it's okay, the me generation, that it was okay to pursue my own happiness, the whole self-help movement a lot of that, the self-esteem movement, even though it was perverted, were movement generated by, I think, a influence of Ayn Rand on the culture, not at a deep level yet, but at some level. All right, were the Nazis not as consistently altruistic as the communists because they had hierarchies? No, I think they were just as consistently altruistic because, I'm not sure why you'd say they're not altruistic. They sacrifice to the state, they sacrifice to the party, they sacrifice to the good of the Aryans as much as the communists did. And both were willing and happy to sacrifice other people for their cause. So it's not like because they believed in hierarchy, the Nazis killed people, like all the Jews, because they believed there were a lower hierarchy, and the communists didn't. No, the communists killed everybody. I mean, and they killed people in certain categories, and they killed hundreds of thousands of Jews. And, so the differences between the Nazis and the communists in terms of altruism, I don't see the difference. I don't see the difference. I think it's the same. Would you ever live in Las Vegas or Henderson? No, I don't think so. Too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter, too crazy. Vegas is great to visit. It's great to spend 3-4 nights there and be 100% materialist and not care about anything else. But that's it. I can't really take Vegas for more than like 4 days. Now, if I lived there, maybe it would be different, but the weather's just too, I'd rather live in Arizona where at least it doesn't get cold in the winter. You have really nice winters, and I'd leave for the summers. All right. I noticed you haven't criticized Harriman, even as he condemns AOI for being pro-Biden. Are you holding back because of his association with Leonard Peikoff? No, as far as I know, he has no association anymore with Leonard Peikoff. He stabbed Leonard Peikoff in the back years ago by going over to David Kelly. No, I'm just not going to go out there and criticizing every person who criticizes AOI. There's be no end to it. And I haven't criticized almost at all any of the people now criticizing AOI. I basically said on the show, I'm not interested in it. Read their stuff, figure out whether you agree with it or not. I'm not going to play defense and my word versus their word. And it goes nowhere. How can you be objective when all you hear is the other side, my side? I think if you read the other side, as far as the elections, you get to choose. My opinion, other people's opinions. You get to choose about where you stand in the election. Me shooting down anybody who comes up, what would be the point? In terms of AOI, look at what we do, look at what we have done, look at what's been achieved, look at the criticisms, and make up your mind. I think the criticisms tend to be filled with contradictions, but I'll leave it to you to find those contradictions and discuss them. I have no intention of poking holes in those. I might write something about what I think are all the achievements of the Ayn Rand Institute, because I think a lot of people are new. They don't have historical context. They don't know what objectivism was like 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I can even go 40, right? And it would be nice to have that, like just an overview of what it looked like and what I think we've achieved over the last 20 years. I might do that as a positive, but I'm not going to do a X says what this, I'm going to say, it would bore me to hell, and it would be uninteresting and non-objective, I think. All right, we're going to do another round. Okay, Jim, you're up first.
That this discussion of elections and stuff has me wondering now if Trump will be treated like Alex Jones and disappeared from the internet. That would be really interesting. But kind of vaguely related to that, I've been, in some ways, in recent years, I've kind of gotten addicted to YouTube. While I'm working as a programmer, I find I can actually listen in to an awful lot of YouTube stuff. I can't like have something visually engaging while I'm working, but at least I can listen to opinion makers. And lately, I think YouTube is doing a good job of making me not like YouTube that much. I'm noticing the interesting people seem to be slowly disappearing from YouTube. And I'm wondering if you think that YouTube is like a lot of the other major social media sources are basically killing themselves by squashing dissent and opinions.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think YouTube makes its money on politics or ideas. I think they make their money on cat videos. I mean, that's what they make their money at, right?
Yeah, how to stuff.
So they can abandon ideas completely, and they'll probably do fine, right? The fact is, it's a minority of people who are interested in ideas. It's not a majority. I don't notice that. I mean, I don't know who has disappeared, but I believe you that some people have disappeared, but I don't watch. I don't find myself. I can't multitask anymore. I used to be able to. I used to be able to do 2-3 things at the same time. Can't anymore. I noticed that if I am listening to YouTube and trying to do work, then my work gets sloppy, and I can't do more than one thing in that way. I certainly used to be able to do it. So I don't listen that much. I follow a few people, and they're still there, the people I follow. So I don't know. But yeah, there's no reason to think YouTube has different criteria than Facebook and Twitter. And they all come from the same place, politically, culturally, intellectually. They're all of the same, coming out of the same universities, if you will. All right, let me just remind people to like the show before you leave. It would be nice if we got that like number up above 100. And subscribe. I'm sure there are a few people on right now that are not subscribers. Usually about 25% to 30% of the listeners are not subscribers. Would love to have you as subscribers. And if you click the bell next to the subscription button, you'll also get notified when I go live. And if you'd like to support the show, you can do so by SuperChat, answering questions on the SuperChat and asking questions on the SuperChat. But of course, you can also do that on Patreon, on Subscribestar, and on youronbookshow.com/support. SuperChat has been kind of quiet today in terms of the dollars, but that's okay. We can keep it going. Let's see. I think that's all the reminders I needed. I will be on again tomorrow. Not sure yet I will be doing something in economics tomorrow. Tomorrow will be something in economics. There was a New York Times article I got sent that has a lot of juicy content for a good show on wages, on economic growth, on what drives economic growth, on productivity, things like that. All right. A lot of people thumbs down today. I don't know did I say something bad? I don't know. Don't know what happened. All right. Let's see. Jonathan.
Thanks, Jaron. I got a question actually for you about architecture, in particular architecture in Israel. I've been to Israel 3 times, and I'd like to go back. But to be honest, I've often felt a lot of the architecture that I've seen, particularly in Tel Aviv, is frankly kind of dumpy. Particularly that white, all the same, I think they call it Jerusalem stone. And I believe there's even building restrictions about it has to be a certain color, this and that. What's your feeling about architecture, that style in Israel? And, is it as unimaginative and kind of dumpy as I think it is? I feel like it is.
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is certain parts of older Tel Aviv, which they're trying to retain the neighborhood style. So this would be from the 20s and 30s. And yeah, the architecture is not great. It's from the 20s and 30s, and it's stone, and and Israel was poor. You have to remember, Israel was a poor country until very recently. So, and it was socialist for a long time. And you get a lot of these blocks of condo buildings that are blocky and ugly and not quite Soviet, a little bit better than that, but same basic principle of monolithic and dull. On the coast in Tel Aviv, you get a little bit of Art Deco, and so you get a little bit more interesting. But you get some stuff that's either Gaudi or people try to imitate Gaudi, which is just plain ugly. So there's not a lot of good architecture in Israel. You don't find good, modern, interesting architecture. A few of the taller buildings are kind of cool, but No, I mean, it just hasn't been rich enough at the right period of time in its development to develop architecturally. They build everything the same. But of course, I'm an enormous critic of architecture in the United States. I mean, God, Americans are so boring when it comes to architecture, right? So I think I've said this on a show in the past. You go to Denver or to Dallas, and you drive in suburban Dallas or Denver, and what are called McMansions. These are massive homes. I don't know, 4,000, 5,000 square feet, 2-3 stories, and they're just blocks, and they all look the same, and they're all the same color, and they have tiny windows. Like in Colorado, they're views. There's something to look at. Open up the space, put up windows. And I find, with the exception of some neighborhoods in LA and some neighborhoods in south of San Francisco, and some neighborhoods in, maybe Laguna Beach, and I'm sure there are places like, Chicago, where there's Frank Lloyd Wright, some skyscrapers are good, but even them, as compared to China or Hong Kong, skyscrapers have become boring in the US. Or even compared, God forbid, to Dubai, the skyscrapers in the United States have become boring in comparison. I think that's all regulation. But people's homes are so cookie cutter.
Legoland.
Yeah, it's all the same. And even with colors, like you go to Denver, everything is brown. You go to Dallas, everything's gray. It's like, come on, imagination, a little bit of spark, of individuality, of something different. And I actually am impressed sometimes with, for example, if you drive here in Puerto Rico, so San Juan is obviously a poor place, but there are some neighborhoods of upper middle class and wealthy people. And you go to those neighborhoods, and there are a lot of pretty interesting modern homes. And given the wealth, you wouldn't expect that. One of my favorite places for architecture in the United States is Scottsdale, Arizona. Scottsdale has some beautiful homes up on the Saddleback Mountain. There's a Frank Lloyd Wright home there, but there are others, some beautiful modern buildings. I like Arizona. I like the desert, but also the condo buildings in Arizona, in Scottsdale, in that area. There's just something a little different. Everything's a little different. The coloration is different. The structure is different. The way they lay it out, the windows. It's just more original. Everywhere else is just the same, and it's boring, and it's dull, and I know it's cheap and it's efficient, but Americans have they lack aesthetic appreciation. And I know that's a generalization, but generally they do. And I've been quite surprised that in Latin America, they like modern architecture and modern furniture, modern design much more than they do in the US, which is just culturally interesting. I don't know what the source of that is. Maybe it's more European. If you want furniture, the places to go to are Scandinavian, Italy. The kind of furniture made in the United States it's furniture for my great grandparents.
This is a big draw for me of downtown Miami and why I'm going to be moving there. It seems like half of the city has been built in the last 20 years, and it's beautiful.
And it's modern, and I think part of the modernity comes from the fact that it's got that Latin South American flair to it. That they definitely have a sense of style when it comes to interior decoration, interior design. And I've seen it here in Puerto Rico. That you just don't see much. You see some, but you just don't see much in the United States.
One bothersome thing, though, is the sort of 60s era modern art aesthetic mixed with the ultra modern architecture.
Yeah, they think that if they have modern architecture and modern furniture, they have to have modern so-called art, and that's sad. But yes, my homes always combine very modern furniture with not modern art. All right, let's see who's next. Let me make sure we've got Jim. We did Jonathan. Okay, let's do Ori. I just go from left to right.
Okay, so part of the virtue of justice is that you have to work to try to understand other people. But in one of, I think it's in Understanding Objectivism, Leonard Peikoff's lecture series, he warns that there's a danger in trying to psychologize other people.
Yep.
And I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so there's definitely a danger in trying to ascertain people's motivations or psychology or state of mind. It's almost impossible to do. And for the purpose of the virtue of justice, for the most part, what you want to judge is their actions and their words, and judge them based on that. Once you start psychologizing them, you're either giving yourself an excuse not to live up to your actual objective judgment, or you're giving them an excuse and letting them off the hook. But you've got to be objective, which partially means you've got to know what you know and what you don't know. And a big part of what you don't know is what's going on in their own head, what emotions they're feeling, what, their motivations, their deepest motivations. So you don't know it. So don't, so judge within the context of what you do know, judge within the context of what you can be objective about.
But if you've demonstrated that you're better at predicting what someone will do than they are?
I don't know that. If you're good at predicting, that in and of itself should tell you something about the person.
Yeah, that they don't know themselves very well.
They don't know themselves, or that they don't act consistently, or they don't have principles, they don't have value. There's something wrong with that. All right, let's see. Daniel.
So what do you think the impact on the culture is of SpaceX? On the practical side, they're giving high-speed internet to more people. They're in the news almost every week, trying things, failing, trying again. What do you see the impact?
I think it's big. I really do. I think entrepreneurs have a huge impact on the culture. I think it keeps alive among the people in which we can keep it alive, the thrill about science and about technology and about advancement and about what's possible. And, in spite of all my misgivings about Elon Musk, I think Elon Musk inspires people. I think he excites people about entrepreneurial activity, about what's possible, about where we could go. So I think it has a huge impact. I'd hate to live in a world in which there wasn't some kind of SpaceX going on somewhere, where there wasn't this excitement about new innovations and going to Mars or doing something that we've never done before. So I think it keeps that spirit alive. And it's getting harder and harder to keep it alive, so it's good. We need them. All right, Naveen.
Hey, Ron. I wanted to make a comment about something that Harry Binswanger said on one of the UK objectivist shows, right? And this was about herd immunity. And I want to make a side comment with regards to that. What he was saying is, he was pointing out to an article in New York Times or somewhere where somebody was saying vaccines are useless unless people use them, right? And he was pointing out how that's so wrong. And he was saying that vaccines are useful even to the people who don't take them, because the people that do take them are in between the other people that don't take them. So it overall increases the herd immunity, right? Because it prevents people from passing it on. And the other thing he was saying is, more importantly than that is, you take it. You take the vaccine. Yeah. So you're immune. Yep. So don't care about the other. You don't have to care about the people that don't take them, right? So similarly, I want to say, with regards to reason, living with collectivism versus individualism and reason, right? I think we don't really need to worry about changing the entire culture, because we can never do that. As long as we can change a few people, we'll still increase the herd immunity, because these people that are living with reason are in between all these collectivist people. So it prevents the collectivist agenda from spreading. And way more important than that is, you live your life based on reason and live a whole totally selfish life. So you'll have a much more impactful life, and don't worry about all the other people that are not living in that way.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I do think we will change the culture. I do think we will get those numbers, but it's not going to happen quickly. But it goes back to one mind at a time. If I can convince a few people and they can join the conversation, then that is really, they then are better. So my life is better because their life is better. Because a trader, I want people to be better off. And then they're living their lives for their own sake. They're not living it for mine or for anybody else's. So that's better. And that they are now barriers before the advancement of collectivism. Absolutely. And if there are enough of them over a long period of time, we will dominate the culture. Right? That's how you dominate the culture, is you slowly grow. And it's slow, and it's not always visible, and it's not always clear it's happening. But you wake up one morning and there are millions of people that are being impacted by what you're doing, and the culture starts really pivoting, because there is such a thing as herd immunity or the tipping point for our culture or whatever, where things dramatically change. Yes, I agree completely.
Right. Thank you.
All right, let's see, Darius.
Thanks. Just a quick request before my question.
Sure.
If you haven't started checking out Coleman Hughes, my request is that you check him out.
He's the guy from the Manhattan Institute,
Yeah.
young guy.
Exactly. Very evidence-based, and has some really, he did a devastating critique of Kendi's work.
Oh, yeah.
I know you did a nice episode on that too. So
Yep.
I think there could be a good alliance there. So my question is, I was hoping you could help me kind of reconcile I guess a little contradiction in my head.
Sure.
So I think you've said in the past that the government should stay out of morality, just like separation of church and state, separation of economics and state, separation of morality and state.
Yep.
But at the same time, individual rights are a moral issue. So how do you square those two things?
Well, clearly they have to. The only reason to form a government is to protect individual rights. So once it's a bridging concept. It's a moral concept, but it's a bridge to politics. But once you've established that you're going to protect individual rights, you don't have to do morality anymore. So it's not about whether, I don't know. Here's an issue that's controversial, and I don't know why it came to my mind. Maybe it's because of Jonathan's dog there. But you beat your dog. I mean, all the government has to ask, the only question the government has to ask is not, is it moral or not? Does it involve the violation of rights? And I would say no. And then the government says, we're not involved. Right? Now, your neighbors would say, you're really a nasty person. It's immoral. And we're not going to deal with you. We're not going to serve you in our restaurants. We're not going to sell you stuff in our stores. We're going to boycott you because you're a nasty person. They're making a moral judgment about you. Now, so you need a starting point. Individual rights are the starting point. But once you have that, government doesn't have to deal with ideas anymore. It's just, what does it mean to defend individual rights? That's what they need to think about. How does it apply in this case or in that case? Why does it not apply here? In what way does it apply over there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Sure. All right, Jennifer.
I have two short ones. First of all, Art Nouveau or Art Deco. And have you been out to see Arecibo? Because they're going to tear it down.
What have I been out to see?
That radio telescope thing in Puerto Rico.
Oh, yes. I heard they're going to tear it down. I haven't gone
Yeah.
out to see it. So yes, I should do the drive. I was looking for an idea for a road trip. We should do that. That'll be a good road trip. Thanks for reminding me. But yes, they're tearing it down because it's so damaged now with the hurricane and then the earthquakes and everything else that it's falling apart. Like, unfortunately, like certain areas, quite a bit of Puerto Rico. Art Deco, Art Nouveau. I think I prefer Art Nouveau, but I like aspects of both. depending on the context, right? I don't like it qua art as much as I like it certain things about the design, right? Like Art Nouveau dominates Prague architecture, and it's really beautiful. And it's not beautiful in the modern sense, but it's beautiful when you know this is what they did back then. And because it was one of the few cities the Nazis didn't destroy, or the Allies didn't destroy during World War II, it's all preserved. So Prague is definitely a city worth visiting to see the city. It's a beautiful, beautiful city. But I like aspects of both, I guess, in the right context. I wouldn't introduce it into my home. I don't like it that much.
No, I like
I
Art
like seeing it
Nouveau.
elsewhere. What's that?
I like Art Nouveau. I like the curvy lines of it.
Yep. So I enjoy seeing it when I go see it, but I don't have anything. I don't think I have anything that would be either Art Deco or Art Nouveau in the house.
You might benefit from an Alphonse Mucha print.
Alphonse Mucha print.
Yeah, he's the quintessential Art Nouveau artist.
How do you spell Mucha?
Mucha. Alphonse Mucha.
Mucha. Alphonse. Alphonse Mucha. All right. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't hang it in my home. Too much going on. But yeah, I like it. It's just not my aesthetic something I would want to look at on a day-to-day basis. So there is this one drawing. It looks like of who is this? Of Sarah Bernhard as Gismonda costume. I don't know what that is, but that's beautiful. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've seen a lot of this art before. I just didn't remember the artist, but it wouldn't be. That's exactly the point where I can like it, appreciate it. Wouldn't enter my home. All right, let's see. Some super chats. I got everybody a second round, right? I think we'll be able to have one quick third round in a minute. Okay, $20. Okay, you've mentioned tracing and isolating as a proper function, at least at the state or local level. How does one determine at what point the state is justified in doing so, drawing the lines between COVID and the flu? I mean, that is real work. I don't have that. I haven't done that work in terms of figuring out what the line is. But first, it has to be something new. So if it's a disease we live with, we've already lived with every year, we know how to deal with it. We know the cost. We don't have any uncertainty related to it. It's just a regular occurrence like the flu. Obviously, you don't do it, right? But it's something new, particularly early on. You don't know how deadly it is. Even today, when we do know how deadly it is, it's still 4 to 6 times deadlier than the flu. Certainly, and much, much higher than that for very old people. But yeah, this work needs to be done, right? And it's not, you see, people think that if you have objectivism, if you have a political theory, the objectivist political theory, then figuring out what the laws should be easy. Just deduce from one to the other. It doesn't work that way. I mean, real thinking needs to happen about defining what a pandemic is, what qualifies as a real risk, when the government has to step in, under what circumstances, what it can do in terms of emergency powers. Can it do lockdowns? Can it do lockdowns? Obviously, it can't unless there's some imminent threat that a short-term lockdown could address, like a terrorist attack or something like that. So is there an equivalent of a terrorist attack in the case of a virus? Imagine if it was killing 25% of anybody got infected. Could you, on a temporary basis, isolate a particular neighborhood or something like that? So all that thinking has to be done. It hasn't been done. Somebody has to write a law that not when the pandemic's happening. By the time the pandemic happens, it's too late. Everybody's panicking. Everybody's upset. Everybody has a political agenda. Everybody's got their little tribe. The work has to be done in advance under calm circumstances. When we get a pandemic, how do we classify how bad it is? Then, what are the appropriate things for government to do? What are the inappropriate things, the things that government cannot do? And that needs to be a bill that Congress passes and that guides future response. So that you don't get in a situation where we expect the federal government to do this stuff. It doesn't do anything, or what it does is ineffectual. And then the federal government says, we're not going to do anything, so that the state government can do it. And the state government can do whatever they want because there's nothing guiding or there's nothing dictating or there's nothing. There has to be real thought put into this. And I'm not an expert on this. You'd have to have some judicial, some legal philosophers. Ayn Rand used to say this a lot. Like, what do we do about guns? Well, you need some legal philosophers to think about this and come up with proper legislation around guns and around other things. All of these things require real thought. I think COVID is probably one where you would do something, but where the focus should have been on old people. And even the testing, tracing, isolating should have been surrounding old people rather than everybody. You should have left most people to live, and you should be focusing on isolating people who are interacting with old people. But you should basically have found a way to protect that population that actually is going to be dramatically harmed from this, which is people over 75, and leave pretty much everybody else alone. And to do that, you would have to figure out a strategy, but nobody's trying to figure out a strategy. And strategy would have to be about testing, isolating, testing, tracing, isolating. And particularly people who work in old age homes or all kind of facilities and hospitals and places where they might come in contact with the elderly. And then people who have family members who live with the elderly. And a lot of this could be done by approving home tests, which exist, but the FDA refuses to approve. So none of this is hard. It's just under capitalism, it would be much easier. Can you give an update on your thoughts about inflation post-COVID due to government stimulus? I vaguely remember prior to COVID, you were asked this question and weren't too concerned. I'm curious if your opinion has changed. Well, I definitely think we need to be concerned about inflation, particularly if the Democrats pass another $1 trillion to $2 trillion stimulus package. Maybe they won't because Republicans will stop them. Maybe it'll be smaller than that. But and then on top of that, if you add on an infrastructure, trillions for infrastructure, there's definitely a potential for inflation to increase significantly. I think though you have to take into account and here we're talking about inflation vis-a-vis prices going up. You also have to take into account the disinflationary forces, and they're huge in our culture. A lot of what we consume is free. Right now, you're consuming stuff for free. A lot of what we consume is imported, and the reasons to believe, as I've said before, that there are pressures in other countries to drive prices down, and maybe the not quite the same inflationary pressures exist over there in terms of dollars. There's a lot going on in the world that offsets. You see, I think we've had inflation, price inflation, for decades. I think if we'd had proper monetary and physical policy, prices would have been coming down dramatically over the last few decades. One of the things that drives up inflation in the United States is the cost of education, for example. Is the cost of education going to continue to rise up at the same rate post-COVID? I don't know, because people are maybe not going to consume education in the same way. So I think it's a tricky proposition, but generally, I think prices are going up. Generally, the money has to flow somewhere. Right now, it continues to seem like it's flowing into financial markets. We'll see if it spreads out into consumption markets as well. It won't until people start going back to consuming in a regular way. So as long as we're not out there consuming large quantities in a kind of a regular fashion, the extra money doesn't get manifested in prices.
Well, it does seem to be in commercial and private real estate.
Yep. It'll go into these financial sectors, but again, the disinflate even there. I mean, certainly residential real estate right now is through the roof. Outside of the core cities, residential real estate values are going way up. So there is definitely inflation pressures, and the question is, where do they manifest themselves? But you can't print trillions of dollars and not have an impact. I mean, one of the impacts is stagnation. And then the second impact could be inflation, and you could get stagflation. All right. So I'm gonna read some of these and do quick answers. These are the less than $20 super chat. What is the difference between knowledge and wisdom? I think knowledge is specific. Wisdom is approach. Wisdom is about how you approach a topic. It's more about your integrated state of your knowledge. It's more about the integration of your knowledge and how you fit new knowledge into this integrated. Knowledge is about the domain in which you are focused on, what you know about this particular domain. So there is something to wisdom being how you approach knowledge, how you integrate knowledge, how you deal with knowledge. All right. Have you heard about Jordan Peterson's addiction to benzos, drugs, drug like Xanax, and a whole episode of him going to Eastern Europe? I guess Russia, really weird. Yeah, really weird is the right response. The whole thing was really strange. He got addicted to this while he was taking it, dealing with the stress related to his wife's cancer. And then he tried a bunch of treatments in the United States and none of them worked. So he landed up in some hospital in Eastern Europe, I think Russia, where they put him in a coma, a self-induced coma. Just the whole thing is weird. I mean, if I had something like that, the last place in the world I'd want to go is Russia. But maybe they were willing to do stuff that the FDA in the United States wouldn't do. So who knows? Maybe there are treatments outside of the US that you cannot do in the US. But the whole episode seems very strange. What's your view of veganism? I mean, my only question of vegans is why? We're clearly carnivores, or at least, both. I forget the term for both.
Omnivore.
What's that?
Omnivore.
Omnivore. We're clearly omnivores. We've evolved eating meat for 100,000 years at least. Clearly, our digestive system and our biology is suited for meat eating. I just don't get why. Right? I mean, there are other things that you could argue we haven't had enough time to evolve to eat, but I just don't get the objection to meat. Meat, I mean, tastes great. It's incredibly full with nutrients, and it's just a matter of figuring out what the right kind of balance is in terms of a diet, and what kind of meat and how much and so on. But to not have meat at all seems strange to me. And veganism, I guess they don't have eggs and they don't have fish, and just, fish is great. Jonathan, what's your dog's name? What breed is it? And is he or she a good boy or girl?
A great value to me, Yaron. I answered your supporter. His name is Frisco. He's a St. Bernese. So he's a St. Bernard mixed with a Bernese mountain dog. He's a very good boy, and I'll quote Ayn Rand, probably not exactly, but I'll do my best, who said, you can either have cats or nice furniture, and I choose cats. I might not be getting that exactly right, something to that effect. So a very good boy, and thanks for asking.
Good, and he's, I mean, is this the kind of dog that goes out and rescues people in the snow?
Indeed, it's that kind of a mountain breed, but
this one looked a little too relaxed for that.
I'm sure he'll lick you to make you feel better.
A little spoiled.
Very domesticated, but it's a great pleasure to. I know we've talked about pets in the past, but he's a great value, and I have a lot of friends, but he's a substitute friend and a value in his own right.
That's wonderful. So another question for you, Jonathan. Favorite 3 investment books?
Yeah, well, two I'll mention are Reminiscences of a Stock Operator by William Lefebvre and Charlie D by Bill Falloon.
Huh. I'll mention, because somebody asked me this question, it's up there. You know, probably the exact opposite of Jonathan's recommendation. So I really like, and I think everybody should read, if you're not a professional investor, everybody should read Random Walk Down Wall Street. I don't agree with everything in it, but I think the fundamental analysis and much of the analysis is important for non-professionals to understand, so that you don't get into trouble. I also like books by Graham on kind of fundamental analysis of stocks and kind of on value investing. Let's see, what's the difference between shrugging and giving up? Well, the motivation. The shrugging is not about giving up. It's about pursuing your values in your life in a different way, having clearly thought out the consequences of the different outcomes. I think giving up is letting them beat you. Shrugging is you rising above them, not letting you beat you. Could some of this staleness in architecture be due to regulation or just lack of creativity? I think it's both. I mean, I find Americans generally, and again, a generalization, no, don't take this personally, but I find generally Americans not very engaged aesthetically. They don't pursue art. They don't pursue the aesthetic. They're very traditional, conventional. They have the same furniture as their parents had. They have the same, so it's not something they think about. And I find Europeans and others do think about the aesthetic of what they do, whereas Americans don't. And I think Ayn Rand would have agreed with that. I'm not sure, but I think she would have. Statements she's made about American culture, I think, would lead me to think that she agreed with that. Now, again, that's a generalization. Of course, there are many Americans who do, and they have great taste and so on. But as a cultural trend, Americans tend not to think about it. I think they visit fewer museums. They take fewer art classes. They, which is good, because most of the art classes corrupt people against good art and for the junk that is exhibited as art. All right, last one. You say that you meant apologists and not Trump supporters as the fifth column, yet the implication remained for months. Could you have been clearer? Oh, I'm sure it could have been clearer. Although if you followed me for months, I think it was quite clear. I think people who listen to the show on a regular basis and who are willing to be objective listeners of what I say understood. When I use the term apologist, and I actually use the term apologist, and I use the term apologist not like some people are quoting the dictionary, apologist is people who support or something like that. And I explained it at the time. Apologist means people who will justify anything he does, anything, including, for example, the hugging of, the friendship between him and the brutal dictator of North Korea. Everything he does was being supported. That's what I said apologist meant to me. Now, maybe I used the word inappropriately. Maybe I used it wrong. People could have corrected me, but I clearly described what I mean by it. So in that sense, I don't think I could have been clearer. But yes, my hostility to Trump and to the people who show up on my chat who are Trump supporters was intense, and I can see why people interpret it wrongly. But I tried often, repeatedly, to clarify what I meant, and I think some people got it and some people didn't. And I can't control what kind of sinks in and what doesn't. What kind of people actually get and what they don't. All right, let's see. Remind you again to like the show. For some reason, a lot of people are disliking this Q&A, and I don't think I've said that many offensive things, but it's interesting. The dynamic of these things is always fascinating. But
maybe they just don't like dogs.
Maybe they don't like dogs. Maybe it's Jonathan's fault, or maybe it's because I don't like dogs. Yeah, it's all the dog lovers going after me. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to support the show. Monthly support is incredibly valuable for us to be able to predict what's coming. We're moving into a new year. I'd like to have a sense of of what I can expect in terms of income next year. We're also going to move into a new studio, into, I think, a proper studio next year. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about my green screen. Hopefully everything works out, but I'm going to paint the wall behind me green. And that's going to allow us to do all kinds of fun stuff with special effects. Anyway, hopefully everything works out. I still don't have a contract from the people who committed to selling me their condo, but hopefully that'll happen tomorrow, Monday or Tuesday. All right, quick round of questions because we've been at it for an hour and a half. Jim.
For you personally and for the Ayn Rand Institute, what are some of your top goals for the end of 2021?
Oh. I don't know for the Institute. So, I'm not sure what you'd have to ask Tal for that, the CEO. I don't think about it that much. I mean, I think about it in the context of being on the board and discussing it when we're on the board. And I can't, I certainly think that things like, significantly continuing to enhance and increase the viewership and engagement with Ayn Rand University, Leonard Peikoff's material, Ayn Rand's lectures, courses, interviews, all of that material. I'd like to see that the trend, which is dramatically up, continue. And I think there's a lot that can be done to better present the material on YouTube, and I think they're working on it now. I think see continued growth in our various programs targeted at high school kids. I think that's still important. And then on the flip side, I'd like to see investment in intellectuals. We're running something called incubators for people trying out, and you're going to see some of the results of this in the months to come. Incubator to try to take people who are interested in doing stuff publicly and giving them the tools to make that happen. So, for example, I don't know, Mark Pellegrino wants to do something more, and we'll bring a producer with him, somebody who can write text for him, and he's going to be producing these short videos that are entertaining and very philosophical. And so we're getting the talent, the production talent, and the creative talent together to produce more content and more varied content, more interesting content. And I'm hoping that really, gets pushed out in the next few years, in the next few months. Yeah, I mean, and then financially that will continue to grow. For me personally, I mean, within the context of this work, I mean, I want my hedge fund to do really well next year. We have clawed ourselves back from the massive hole that was created in March, and we're very close to clawing ourselves back to break even. So I'd like next year for us to, return to shareholders 15-20%. That would be very sweet. After this year, that would be very sweet from a number of different dimensions. I'd like to be able to raise more money and create new products. We've got some ideas of new products. In terms of the show, I'd like to see a show grow in terms of subscribers steadily, and at a faster pace than what we're doing right now. I mean, you get these big spikes when they do something like Lex Friedman, but then it drops to very low levels. So I don't know how to get that subscriber base growing steadily month in, month out, kind of at a high level. I'd like to get the SuperChat to a kind of a stable, systematic, predictable level. I still have a feeling that we've had some abnormally high months, and I don't quite trust that future months will be quite as high. So I'd like to get, that stable. And then the monthly contributions, I'd like to see that grow, let's say 20 to 25% next year. Which is pretty aggressive. And I'd like to see the subscribers grow, 25% would be really cool if we could go 25% next year. So we should be over 30,000 at the end of next year in terms of subscribers. That's the goal. I don't, if I get on Joe Rogan's show, it'll be easy. If I don't get on Joe Rogan's show, it's going to be a slog. But that's the goal.
All sound like good goals all around.
Yeah, but part of the goal is to get on Joe Rogan. Part of the goal is maybe to do some television. I haven't done television in many years. Maybe that'll expand the audience. Oh, I haven't announced this yet, but in December, we are in December already. Well, no, 2 more days. Anyway, sometime in the next couple of weeks, John Stossel will be coming out with a new video, which will feature me. So at least I don't know how much of me, but it'll be there. I did a long interview with him a few days ago for that episode. It's going to be an episode of on charity and entrepreneurs and things like that. So that'll be interesting to see. So yeah, it'll be nice. So things like that. I'd like to do more stuff like that. Oh, and my big goal for next year, drum roll, please. I want to travel. I want to give a talk in London, and I want to give a talk in Tbilisi, and I want to give a talk in Rio de Janeiro, and I don't know, Mexico City and Bogota, Colombia. So and maybe I don't think 21 is the year. Maybe 22. I want to go give a round of talk in Asia. So I want to get on a plane and go give talks. I mean, you guys are nice, and 2 dimensions is cool, but you can't beat 3-dimensional people. All right, that was a long answer to a short question. Darius, well, I'll try to make my answer shorter.
Yeah, well, I'll make mine quick. It's not even a question. Since you guys are talking about investment book recommendations, and since I kind of know a thing or two about that, that's my profession. I've read those other books. My recommendation is Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth by Nick Murray.
Oh, wow. Okay. I've never heard of that. Simple Wealth, Inevitable Wealth. Good. Thanks, Darius.
Sure.
Jennifer, and we still have to do that show. Right, Jennifer.
I've heard people talk about politics, and they'll say politics is government and who's president and stuff like that. But isn't politics also ethics applied to relationships, right? So if you are on a desert island, there's ethics, but there's no politics. But if one other person came, then there would be politics too? Or is that not really the right definition?
I think this has to be societies. I don't know if one other person, there'd be politics. I don't know if we'd call it politics. I think politics is bigger in a sense. It's how we organize ourselves in a society, how we relate to other people in a society. But there's a sense in which certainly individual rights suddenly come into the picture, right? But it's not quite at the level of politics, I think, if it's just one other person. I think there has to be, I don't know what the number is, but there has to be, like, now, okay, there's a society, right? I mean, like, you don't need a government when you have 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, 10 people. But at some point you do. And that's the point. I do think politics is about government. So I don't think politics is about just individual human relationships. I think that can be dealt with as morality. At some point, the numbers get too big to be dealt with directly. Something like that.
Thank you.
Somebody says I should have a travel vlog, and that might take off. I've thought of this, running around the airport with my camera on me and talking about, oh, I'm in Singapore right now and I'm running for my flight. And look, it's Singapore. And
Keeping up when you're on.
I think the number of subscribers would go through the roof. And I would hate myself. So for the sake of my self-esteem, I'm not doing a travel vlog. All right, Naveen.
Hey, Ron. So this is about the focus in current corporate culture, right? There seems to be a huge focus on inclusion and diversity. And it's coming from various different places, for a company which has a few 100,000 employees, and a lot of them are in a place like India, for example, which is very hierarchical, where social culture is valued way more, or social status is valued way more than ideas. So, male ideas from men are valued way more than women, or ideas from somebody that's higher up in management is valued way more than somebody that's not. So they want to include everybody, but that brings out all the collectivist bozos from everywhere. And, there's this whole attitude of, it becomes basically relativistic, right? Everything goes kind of thing. So what should a corporation instead focus on, or promote in that way instead of inclusion and diversity? What could be one thing that they would, they would want their employees to focus on?
Excellence, productiveness, being good at what you do. Nothing else matters on a corporate context. How productive are you? So, if that means only women, then it means only women. If it means only people with green hair, then it means only, whatever it takes. Excellence in production is all business should care about. Oh, which reminds me, that's another announcement. It appears I will be debating John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, on conscious capitalism. So that'll happen. It looks like either in February,
That's awesome.
either in February
That is great.
or in May. Now the proposition is not a good proposition, but I agree. Just because I want to debate Mackey's, I don't care what the proposition is. That's basically the attitude I took. But so I'm going to be debating him, and a lot of it will be this. The business is there to make money, and you do what it takes to make money. Within the context of you're not committing fraud. Long-term money, so that you can get rid of all the short-term stuff. That's it. And then you function based on that. And what you want from employees is that they're productive. And part of being productive might be that they're happy, that they're well treated, that they're nice to customers, that they, you could have a list of what makes them productive, but it's the productive that matters.
Will that be in person?
What's that?
Will that be in person?
That will be in person. That will be in person. Probably in New York. If not, some maybe Florida, but likely in New York. Yeah, Mackey was on Joe Rogan the other day and said some good things and some pretty silly things as well. So maybe I should do a show analyzing Mackey's appearance on Joe Rogan. All right, Jonathan.
I'll skip my round, but just congratulate you on your work and hope you continue to do it into 2021 and beyond.
Not going anywhere. No plans. All right, Daniel.
So TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, largest fabricator of integrated circuits in the world. Anyone with a laptop or a mobile phone and the military use a tremendous number of their integrated circuits. So if China takes over TSMC and uses them as a political pawn, they're not a US company. So they're not violating the rights of US citizens, but certainly we get hurt. And what the US federal government has done is said, well, we'll protect your intellectual property, which is mostly trade secrets, if you come to the US, which, because they're Taiwan, would not normally be protected. And places like Phoenix are saying, well, we'll build all this infrastructure for you when you sign this deal, which they did, to invest $12 billion over the next 10 years. What should be the government's response to TSMC? So
TSMC is a Taiwanese company that's been taken over by a Chinese company with links to the government.
Well, potentially, if China does a lot more against Taiwan, basically turns it into Hong Kong, then TSMC could come a lot more under their direct control. Yeah.
So the fundamental question is there a national security risk? And if there is, then one needs to take action vis-a-vis the national security risk. So, for example, you might say, we're not going to use this in any national security related equipment. Or we're going to somehow, unless there's a national security risk, the government has no role in it. And let's say this came up with the TikTok, if you have evidence that TikTok is stealing information from people and handing it over to the Chinese government, or handing it over to the mafia, or handing it over to anybody, then there's thieves. And then they should be dealt with as thieves. That is, they should be taken to court, and they should be prosecuted. And if the necessary remedy might be shutting them down. But you have a burden of proof. You have to prove that they stole, just like in anything else. Just because they're owned by a Chinese company doesn't eliminate the burden of proof. So you have to show that they're stealing stuff, and then they have to be prosecuted like you'd prosecute any theft, any crook. I mean, this was my point about the intellectual property that supposedly Chinese companies steal from American companies. Not supposedly, some of them do. Those products where you know that are based on stolen intellectual property should be banned from selling in the United States and in all our allies, because it's stolen property. And we know how to deal with stolen property. So they turn this into complex political questions, but really just deal with it like you deal with fraud and theft and national security issues. And I don't think it's that difficult. Plus, I'll add this. If the United States had a coherent foreign policy, which I don't think it's had since World War II, and everybody in the world knew, if you do this, this is what America does. If you do this, this is what America does. If you do that, we flatten you, right? So different things that you do, you know how we're going to respond unequivocally. Then a lot of this stuff would never happen. A lot of this stuff would never happen because they know, and they wouldn't want to mess with us. But we are weak. We have been weak. Trump didn't change that. And they look for gaps. They look for places where we're weak, and evil forces will drive through those gaps and will try to impact us. And, you know, I think, look at what they did in Hong Kong under Trump's watch. Anybody who believes that Trump was tough on China just has to look at Hong Kong and see that no, obviously the Chinese thought they could get away with murder, which they did. And they did get away with murder. If Trump had been strong, tough on China, Chinese wouldn't have even tried to go after Hong Kong. Trump might have been tough on China on particular things, but not on China as a real threat. And this is why I'm really afraid for Taiwan, because I think they really sense our weakness. Would America commit to a war over Taiwan? Probably not. So if they think they can do it quickly with minimal casualties without having to, destroy the infrastructure in Taiwan, why wouldn't they invade and just take over? The thing that stopped them used to be that they believed that America would act. They don't. I think they don't believe that anymore. And Trump didn't help, right? He made it worse, not better.
Yeah. And on the intellectual property side, do you agree that the federal government should kind of step across the line and say, hey, if you bring it to the U.S., what you developed in Taiwan, we'll protect it here in the U.S.?
Yeah, I'm surprised that doesn't happen automatically. I'm surprised there's no agreement between the U.S. and Taiwan in terms of intellectual property, that they both respect each other's intellectual property.
China won't allow it. They refuse to allow them to be part of the WTO or the WHO.
Yeah, I see. So yeah, but that's part of the American weakness. The idea that America, in a sense, forced Taiwan to leave the United Nations because China demanded it, put aside that nobody should be in the United Nations. The idea that Taiwan is not in all these international organizations because China won't allow it, and that happened under Nixon going all the way to today, is just such a capitulation, such a compromise with evil. And again, if Trump did little things, like he picked up the phone when the Taiwanese president called, and that was woo. But if he was serious about it, he would have gone to Taiwan and visited, right? He would have he would have opened an embassy. Right now, there's an American library or something like that serves as the American embassy in Taiwan because we won't recognize them. The whole thing is pathetic, completely pathetic.
Yeah, and it seems like Taiwan is disappearing in American pop culture, left and right.
Yeah, because nobody really wants to take it seriously, and nobody wants to think about it because they don't have a solution to it, neither left nor right. All right, great. Thanks, guys. Thanks for all the support. Thanks for the regular monthly support. I really, really appreciate that.
Thank you, as always.
Thanks for all the great questions. Thank you for all being, for listening in. Don't forget to like the show before you leave. This is one of the most disliked shows I've ever done. It's fascinating. So like the show before you leave. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And of course, don't forget to become a supporter if you're not a supporter and you get value from what we do. So you can do that at YaronBrookShow.com/support. Thanks, everybody. And I'll see you all tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern time, we will have a show on something related to economics. We'll see exactly how I title it. Bye, guys.
Thank you.